Factsverse presents Truly Amazing Survival Stories. Number 1. The Robertson Family. In 1971, the Robertson family boarded their 43-foot schooner named the Lucette. For 17 months, the family successfully sailed from port to port. On June 5, 1972, a pod of killer whales approached the ship and caused serious damage to the vessel. They were about 200 miles west of the Galapagos Islands. In order to save themselves, the family and one inexperienced crew member escaped on a life raft and a small dinghy. For days, the family and the crew member survived by drinking rainwater. They also hunted sea turtles, flying fish, and Dorado. After 16 days, the life raft lost all of its air and the family could no longer stay in it. They were lost at sea, and they only had the dinghy that was a little over 9 feet long. Their supplies were also almost gone, and they were ready to give up. After their 38th day adrift, they were spotted by Japanese fishermen. They were rescued on July 23, 1972. The father, Dougal Robertson, kept a journal just in case the family was rescued. His journal was eventually turned into a novel called Survive the Savage Sea. It was also made into a movie with the same name. Number 2. Anna Begenholm. Anna Begenholm was skiing in the mountains in Norway with 2 friends in 1999 when she lost control of her skis. She fell headfirst into a stream that was covered with ice. When the frozen water gave way, she was trapped under a layer of ice that was close to 8 inches thick. When her 2 friends found her in the ice, they tried to rescue her with no luck. While holding Anna's skis so that they wouldn't go deeper into the water, they tried to contact a rescue team. While under the ice, Anna was able to find an air pocket underneath. She managed to stay conscious for 40 minutes before suffering from circulatory arrest. When the rescue team arrived, they cut a hole in the ice with a gardening shovel and pulled her out from the ice. At the time of her rescue, she had been trapped in the ice for 80 minutes, and her temperature was a shocking 56.7 degrees Fahrenheit. That was the lowest body temperature ever recorded in a human who suffered from accidental hypothermia and lived. Number 3. Harrison Objegba Okene. Harrison Objegba Okene was in a tugboat with 11 other team members. When the boat sunk to the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean, it was so deep that many experts say that even the most experienced divers would have perished. The 29-year-old was underwater for almost 60 hours. He managed to survive thanks to an air pocket that formed in the engine room. Fortunately, a group of South African divers arrived to search the wreck for bodies. The sailor followed the divers' lights and found them. Fortunately, he was rescued before his supply of oxygen ran out. They went down to get him with diving equipment, and he had to be placed in a decompression chamber for 2 days. He was lucky to be alive. Number 4. Julianne Koepke. Julianne Koepke was the only survivor on a Lanza flight plane that crashed in 1971. She was just 17 years old. The commercial flight was traveling from Lima, Peru to the city of Pucallpa when the plane was struck by lightning during a severe thunderstorm. When the plane was struck, it sustained serious structural damage which caused it to crash in the Amazon rainforest. She managed to survive while remaining strapped in her seat. She suffered from a broken collarbone, a deep gash in her arm, and a swollen eye. For 11 days, she managed to survive thanks to survival advice she'd received from her father. Fortunately, she managed to locate a group of local lumbermen. They took care of her injuries, and they took her on a 7-hour canoe ride to their lumber station. From there, she was airlifted to a hospital. The doctors and many survival experts say that she was very lucky to be alive. Number 5. Aron Ralston. Outdoorsman Aron Ralston was trekking alone through the Blue John Canyon in Utah. While he was climbing down, a suspended boulder became dislodged and it pinned his right hand against the canyon wall. He hadn't told anyone that he was going out hiking and he had no way to call for help. Therefore, there was very little chance that he would ever be rescued. He stayed there for 5 days. When he ran out of the food and water that he had with him, he was forced to use the dull tools that he had with him to amputate his own arm. Unfortunately, he couldn't cut through his bone. When his arm started to decompose, he was able to break the bones using the torque against his pinned arm. When he was finally free, he rappelled down a 65-foot wall and he was found by a family on vacation. They quickly got him to a hospital and he survived. he's one of the most amazing survival stories. Number 6. Mauro Prosperi. Mauro Prosperi, an experienced endurance runner, participated in the Marathon des Sables in Morocco in 1994. It was a difficult 6-day marathon. While running, a sandstorm caused him to become disoriented and he ran in the wrong direction. After 24 hours, he ran out of food and water. Because of the extreme heat, he was only able to run in the early morning hours and in the evening. He happened upon an abandoned Muslim shrine where he found shelter. He drank his own urine to survive, and he ate the blood and guts from the bats that were on the ceiling. Finally, he gave up hope. He tried to slice his wrists to commit suicide, but due to the fact that he was dehydrated, his blood coagulated, which kept him alive. When he was able to manage his composure and start fighting again, he kept walking through the desert using any possible resource he could find along the way. Finally, he found an oasis, and a group of nomads found him. They took him to safety. It turned out that he was 142 miles off the marathon route. During his time lost in the desert, he lost 40 pounds. This dangerous experience didn't stop him from his love of ultramarathons, though. 8 years later, he entered the same race again, and he completed it. He came in 131st place. Number 7. Stephen Callahan. Stephen Callahan is an experienced yachtsman. He was out on the water for 7 days traveling from the Canary Islands to Antigua. During a night storm, his vessel became holed by an unknown object. He was forced to get into an inflatable raft, and all he had was a survival kit while he drifted aimlessly through the open sea. When the little food he had was gone, he survived by harpooning fish. He ate mostly triggerfish and mahi-mahi. Using solar stills and jury-rigged devices, he managed to make a little over a pint of water each day for drinking. He traveled over 2,000 miles, and he was lost at sea for 76 days. During this time, he had to deal with punctures in his vessel, strong waves, physical deterioration, and shark attacks. On the 76th day, a group of fishermen off the island of Marie-Galante, Guadeloupe, spotted a flurry of birds that were hovering over him, and they were able to rescue him. It is amazing he managed to survive. Number 8. Joe Simpson and Simon Yates. In 1985, friends Joe Simpson and Simon Yates were climbing the 20,813-foot-high Sayula Grande in the Peruvian Andes. When they were coming down the mountain, Simpson fell through a cornice and he broke his right leg and his heel. Due to his injuries, Yates had to lower him using ropes. When bad weather hit, Yates lowered Simpson off a cliff that he didn't see. Simpson was dangling over a deep crevice while connected to Yates by the rope. Yates couldn't see Simpson, and he couldn't hear him. To keep himself from going over the side of the mountain, he was forced to cut the rope. Simpson fell 50 feet into the crevasse, but he didn't die. It took him 4 days of dragging himself through rough terrain before he arrived at base camp. The two men were reunited in the middle of the night. Simpson is lucky that he arrived when he did because Yates was planning to leave camp the next morning. Number 9. Ricky Megee. Ricky Megee was a 35-year-old man when he was forced to survive for over 3 months in the Australian outback. He told rescuers that the last thing he remembers is his car breaking down. However, the details of how he became lost is a mystery. He was in one of the most isolated places in Australia. Fortunately, he was lost during the wet season, so he had enough water to keep him alive. He also survived on snake, frogs, and lizards. For 10 days, he walked with no clue as to where he was. Finally, he found a dam and he used branches to build a shelter. He was discovered by local farmers and he was rescued. He was lucky that he was found because at the time of his rescue, he had already lost half of his body weight. Number 10. Helicopter crew. Michael Benson, Chris Duddy, and Craig Hosking were in a helicopter shooting the inside of the Puuuo crater of Kilauea located in Hawaii. It's the world's most active volcano. Due to low visibility, the helicopter crashed into a wall. Fortunately, the 3 men aboard were not injured, and when they fell, they missed the bubbling pool of lava in the volcano. Benson and Duddy tried to climb the volcano walls to signal for help, while Hosking stayed behind to radio for help. It wasn't long before Benson and Duddy lost sight of Hosking. When they heard a helicopter above, they had hope. Unfortunately, the men could not be seen by the helicopter due to the fog and clouds. They had to spend the night in the volcano. The next morning, Duddy risked climbing the walls and Benson stayed behind. Duddy got out of the volcano, but he wasn't sure if his colleagues were alive. Finally, after 2 days with no food or sleep, Benson was spotted by a helicopter and he was lifted to safety. Number 11. Truman Duncan. In June 2006, a Texas rail yard worker was pulled under a rail car and was dragged under the wheels for 75 feet. The lower half of his body was caught up in the train's wheels, and the upper portion of his body was almost detached from the lower half. It was a miracle that he remained conscious and he called 911. Next, he called his family. That gave him the will to live. When he was rescued, he was airlifted 62 minutes to the hospital. Despite losing more than half of the blood in his body, he survived. He had to endure 23 surgeries, and today he works that same rail yard in the office. Number 12. Katrina Burgess. Katrina Burgess was 17 years old when she was in a nearly fatal 70-mile-per-hour car crash. She sustained a variety of injuries, including a broken back, neck, ribs, a damaged pelvis, and punctured lungs. She needed to have 11 metal rods placed in her body, and she was told that she might not ever walk again. When her story got out, a modeling agency saw her picture and they ended up signing her. Subscribe for more.